Hi, I'm Dom, and on my set behind me is something that fell off an Australian theme park ride. Disney has a lot of roller coasters, around 35 to be exact, and today, alongside my co-host Luke, we're going to rank every single one of them. We're going to do this in a tier list format by giving each coaster a letter, because ranking everyone in order made the comment section on our last video very mean. We're using a normal distribution method, which means that most coasters will be either getting a B or a C, which is average, with other tiers being given sparingly based on the quality to ensure that the outliers stand out. Also, to keep things simple, we're using Roller Coaster Database to determine whether something is a coaster or not. If it isn't on the database, then it isn't a coaster. Obviously, this is going to be our opinion, and I doubt every one of you is going to agree with us entirely, so let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. With housekeeping out of the way, let's go park by park and coaster by coaster in opening order and give each one a grade.
Starting at the original Disney theme park, Disneyland features a wide range of coasters situated across various tiers. Matterhorn Bobsleds is not just the original Disney roller coaster, but also the first ever tubular steel roller coaster, and boy does it feel it. At over 65 years old, this ride at times feels more like riding around inside a washing machine than alpine sledding down the majestic Swiss Alps. But its historical context alone makes it a rite of passage for theme park fans. And hey, the ride even comes with a complimentary back adjustment when you're riding, one of the only free things you can still get at a Disney park today. C tier. Space Mountain might not be the original version of this attraction, but this version is easily the best. Zipping around in the dark, unable to see where you're going, is always going to be a thrilling affair. But doing all of that whilst being serenaded by the blissful Sciacchitano soundtrack elevates this ride into an ethereal affair. While this version does get overlaid once a year by the much inferior Hyperspace Mountain, at least at this park, it's only a temporary addition. A tier. And hey, if you think our channel is an A tier as well, be sure to subscribe and like the video. We're well on our way to our dream of 100,000 subscribers. And hey, if you think we're an S tier channel, be sure to check out our Patreon or YouTube memberships for exclusive content you won't find anywhere else. Now, apart from one, which we will get to a bit later, all Big Thunder Mountain railroads feel almost exactly the same. You board a runaway mine train and strap in for the wildest ride in the wilderness. I do love how the Disneyland version allows you to walk around almost the entire perimeter, has the incredibly cool projection-mapped explosion scene on the final lift hill, and even has a neat little finale where you blast past the dinosaur bones and into the town of Rainbow Ridge. Disney is known for its mountain coasters for a reason, and this sure is one of them. C tier. And finally, we get to this park's kiddie coaster, Chip and Dale's Gadget Coaster. A ride so, we don't even have any footage of it. Look, this coaster fills its space in the park perfectly. The first coaster your child ever gets the courage up to ride. And for that, we can appreciate it for what it is. Something we're going to say a lot about the various kiddie credits at Disney theme parks around the world. Of course, as two grown 30-year-old men, it's not exactly at the top of our must-ride lists on visits to the park. At least it is bright, colorful, and kinetic. Perfect for Mickey's Toontown. E tier.
Moving on to the Magic Kingdom, the park with the most roller coasters of any Disney park in the world, being home to 5. However, every one of those rides is one where a copy exists somewhere else in the world, and not often than not, the Magic Kingdom version is the weaker version. Space Mountain is the original version of this ride and created a legacy much stronger than the attraction itself. Hidden inside the space station spires are actually 2 separate coaster tracks, essentially being a smoother Matterhorn but indoors. Unfortunately, this version of the ride doesn't feature any onboard audio and instead has stereophonic sound, which is a fancy name for generic sci-fi sounds being blasted into the main building of the ride that you can sometimes hear as they whoosh past you. Look, I'd be lying if I said I didn't rope drop this almost every time I'm in the Magic Kingdom. Overall, decent, though it's not incredible. Though it does have one of the better queues out of all of the Space Mountains. C tier. Big Thunder Mountain has recently closed for a large refurbishment set to fully retract the ride and update a number of scenic and show elements. Hopefully this refurb brings it in line with the Disneyland version of the attraction, as this version just feels older and not as fun. The part where you whip around past the Rivers of America was enjoyable, but with the upcoming Cars Land next door, who knows what this section will look like when it finally opens. Also, there used to be guns pointed directly at this part of the track, which was certainly a choice. C tier. The Barnstormer is this park's kiddie coaster where you fly with Goofy over a whole lot of nothing. It's essentially a grassy hill with some light theming. E tier. Seven Dwarfs Mine Train had so much potential, but it is unfortunately not quite enough of a coaster to be fun, and not quite enough of a dark ride to be enjoyable. The absolute absurd wait times this ride gets doesn't help it either, with most people, us included, coming off simply going, "That was it?" The dark ride scene in the mine is a great moment, and the drops can be fun towards the back of the ride, but the lackluster swinging element that was oversold and the low capacity cement this ride as a D tier. Tron Light Cycle Run is the newest coaster in the Magic Kingdom and the best. The ride seamlessly blends a jaw-dropping launch into an outdoor section and the super tight corners and racing feeling of the indoor second half of the ride. Unfortunately, the placement in this park right next to Space Mountain does make this version of the ride feel a little out of place compared to its twin sister in Shanghai, which we'll get into later. B tier.
For the first 40 years of its life, Epcot didn't have a single coaster, and it was seemingly worth the wait. Whether Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind thematically fits at Epcot or not is an argument irrelevant to this video. For this video's sake, the only thing that matters is if the ride is enjoyable or not. And yes it is. The ride hits you with so many elements that all just add to the fun. The soundtrack is incredible, as long as you don't get conga, the thrills are genuine, and the controlled spinning adds a layer of enjoyment never before seen on a Disney coaster. I do wish the giant animatronic Eason was built, but that's a minor nitpick for an almost perfect ride. And hey, the pre-show is the closest thing we're gonna get to that really awesome Poseidon Fury effect now at Orlando, now that Daddy Darkanon is no longer with us. This coaster is incredible, and the first of very few to make it into the S tier.
Tokyo Disneyland was Disney's first overseas park and features no exclusive or original roller coasters. In fact, all three coasters in this park have clones we've already talked about elsewhere in the video. Tokyo's version of Space Mountain holds a unique record in the realm of Disney roller coasters. It's the only one ever to be fully closed and torn down and rebuilt in a completely new way. Last year, the original version of this ride was shut down and completely demolished, with a brand new version of Space Mountain set to open at the park in 2027. The now defunct version of this coaster was essentially just a copy and paste from Disneyland, but unfortunately without the onboard audio, making it a fun ride but a weak version of Space Mountain. C tier. This is the third Big Thunder Mountain we've talked about now, and we essentially have nothing more to say of this iteration. It's just Big Thunder Mountain. C tier. Gadget's Go Coaster is an identical copy of the ride from Disneyland, but here is still based around a character from the 1980s TV show which pretty much none of the coaster's intended audience would know. E tier.
Moving back to the United States, next up is Disney's Hollywood Studios, a park with only 2 coasters, both of which are don't-miss experiences on your Walt Disney World vacation. Rock and Roller Coaster starring Aerosmith is the only coaster in the world that urges you to check out Steven Tyler's hat. This is arguably the most intense coaster Disney has ever built, with the launch kicking you back into your seat before the ride whips you around and around past bizarre flat cutouts of famous Los Angeles landmarks. This ride is crazy. Have you ever seen the coaster outside of its building? It's spaghetti, that's the only way to explain it. The ride is essentially a more intense Space Mountain, but with inversions. And the onboard audio blasting Aerosmith tracks enhances the enjoyment of this ride considerably. The attraction also belongs in Disney theme park history for having one of the most iconic pre-shows of any ride. Also, the upcoming change of this ride from Aerosmith to the Muppets has the potential of making it even greater. B tier.
Hi, I'm Dom, the other host of Review Time. I'm very far away. Now, I'm not. You might think I'm magic, which I am, but by law I have to denounce my arcane past. No, this is actually the Hover Air X1 Pro Max, probably the most exciting sponsor we've had today. We like tech here at Review Time, but we need devices fit for travel. We've had drones before, but they're just inconvenient. You need the bulky drone, the controllers, all the wires. It's a lot. With this, you don't need any of that. Just the drone. You push this button, and with a click, you have incredible 8K cinematic shots. It is your personal cinematographer, and I mean personal because this thing legitimately follows you around. I decided to visit a nearby forest and really put this drone through the ringer. Alongside getting some incredible shots, it dodged out of the way of trees, branches, vines, and on the rare occasion it did have a tumble, it took it like a champ. Thanks to its protective frame, it can drop, bounce a bit, and then just be ready to go for the next shot. All of these require just one button, and hell, they have a controller if you do want to go full manual, but having all of these shots just a single click away is a game changer for travel. If there is one drone that you should consider for travel, make it this one, because honestly, it is a game changer. Huge shout out to 00 Robotics for sponsoring this video, and be sure to check out the Hover Air X1 Pro Max. It is insanely cool. Now back to Luke.
Slinky Dog Dash might just be the ultimate family roller coaster, with enough thrills and enjoyment for everyone in the family to have a great time with. With no inversions, it makes a perfect alternative to Rock and Roller Coaster. Even off the ride, the coaster is incredible to watch, and it adds some desperately needed kinetics to the Toy Story land it's in. The ride also has a wheezy animatronic crooning out his best "You've got a friend in me" at the end. What more could you want? B tier.
Surprisingly, Disneyland Paris is in the second place for the number of Disney coasters, and the 4 roller coasters that they do have run the full gamut of incredible to terrible. Remember earlier in the video when we said
that apart from one which we will get to a bit later?
Well, Big Thunder Mountain at Disneyland Paris is that exception. For the most part, it is the same coaster found elsewhere. However, after leaving the station, you find yourself going underground and winding up on an island surrounded by the rivers of the far west. This isn't called the Rivers of America here. I don't believe it's called the Rivers of America anywhere outside of America. It's a simple change, but it enhances the experience both on and off the ride, making this the definitive version of Big Thunder Mountain. B tier. KC Jr. Le Petit Train du Cirque is a neat little powered family coaster that takes you around the grounds of Fantasyland. It's a slightly more thrilling way of seeing the canal boat dioramas, but isn't anything particularly special or groundbreaking. D tier. Excuse my Parisian, but Indiana Jones et le Temple de Peril might be one of the worst Disney attractions I've ever personally experienced. The Indiana Jones name in most other Disney parks is synonymous with grand, ambitious attractions, and Temple de Peril is everything but. At only 1 minute and 15 seconds, it is one of the shortest coasters on this list. The trains are unbearably uncomfortable, the looping element in the middle feels like nothing, and most of the queue is exposed to the elements. Though the central temple is well constructed, this coaster is neither interesting nor fun, committing the cardinal sin of failing on both counts. It is an uninspired, joyless ride that offers little. F tier. The only time I've ridden Space Mountain at Disneyland Paris was when it was known as Space Mountain Mission 2, taking inspiration from Jules Verne with a steampunk aesthetic. It is about as similar to the other Space Mountains as a Pepsi Max is to the Queen, instead being closer to the experience of something like Rock and Roller Coaster with a high-speed launch that throws you into an aggressive series of twists and inversions. Whilst very fun, it is also very rough, or at least it was. Although the park thankfully replaced the trains to enhance the experience, the ride was concurrently rebranded as Star Wars Hyperspace Mountain in 2017. This change is problematic because the overlay barely altered the ride itself, aside from a few posters in the queue, banners in the station, and a Star Wars soundtrack. It remains 90% the original Space Mountain. This makes for a poor experience for Star Wars fans and is almost offensive to those who prefer the original iteration. B tier.
Disney's Animal Kingdom continues the trend of single coaster parks having the best coasters. Well, at one point they did have Primeval Whirl, a lackluster D-tier spinning wild mouse coaster, but thankfully, the one coaster that remains is much better than that. Expedition Everest is almost the perfect representation of a Disney coaster, offering the ideal mix of thrills and fun, all set within a level of theming that only Disney can achieve. Sure, the Yeti has been downgraded to a shadow of its former self, now participating in the 1970s disco dance craze, but he was just the cherry on the sundae. And thankfully, the rest of the sundae still exists and is still delicious. It's a near-perfect experience from the moment you first step foot into the queue, and it's a coaster I could ride again and again and again and again and again. A well-deserved S tier.
Disney California Adventure is up next with a surprisingly small list of coasters. Incredicoaster is a tough one to rank. If you know us, you'll know that we loved California Screaming. Its voiceover script before the launch is what we use for our podcast intro. And while today the coaster is exactly the same layout, the current Incredible storyline just kind of falls flat for me compared to the well-timed carnival music that was there originally. This is the longest coaster in any Disney park, and the layout is packed with launches, airtime pops, and that famous loop adding together to a stupidly fun overall product. But to be fair, the original didn't have babies on sticks, so that is one point to this new version, I guess. B tier. Goofy's Sky School is one of, if not the most generic coasters that still exists in a Disney park, apart from the ones which are basically flat rides. It is an off-the-shelf wild mouse coaster you're likely to find at your local amusement park with a little bit of Disney paint job slapped over the top. It's fun, but only because these types of rides already were fun. Disney didn't really do anything on top of that. D tier.
For being the world's best theme park, Tokyo Disney Sea's coaster lineup is incredibly lacking, featuring essentially no must-ride roller coasters. Flounder's Flying Fish Coaster is a mouthful to pronounce and is this park's kiddie coaster, which is slightly elevated over the others due to the location that soars over a little lagoon and gives you a neat, elevated view of a few areas of the park. E tier. Raging Spirits might just be the greatest disconnect between visuals and physical feelings I've ever felt on a roller coaster. Off-ride, they build this up to be an intense experience, featuring a loop. But once you're on the ride, you feel almost nothing. I have never experienced a coaster inversion with so little force as this one. Also, being the only major thrill coaster in the park means that, just like my hair currently, the wait times for this ride are too long. Don't waste your precious Disney Sea time on this one. D tier.
In our recent Disney Parks ranking video, we called Walt Disney Studios Park easily the worst of them all, and it was one of the only few things that people agreed with us on. However, their coaster lineup puts them in the middle of the pack quality-wise. This park used to have the coolest iteration of Rock and Roller Coaster, where instead of getting you to an Aerosmith concert, the coaster itself was the Aerosmith concert. This has since been replaced with Avengers Assemble Flight Force, which I have not ridden, but takes away a lot of the elements that made Rock and Roller Coaster so fun. It's much darker, more sterile, and feels like it was changed out of mandated necessity instead of providing guests with a better overall experience. C tier. My wife rode Crush's coaster over a decade ago shortly after it opened, and assumed that the 3-hour advertised wait time was a lie to deter people from getting in line. This was not a lie, and despite many holding this coaster in relatively high regard as a fun, thematically driven experience, she hated it because she did not believe it was worth the wait. Because I live with her, I need to take this into account to not wind up on the couch. C tier. Now, despite not looking like it, RC Racer is technically a roller coaster because it goes. The experience can be fun if you're at the very back or very front, but almost everything else about this coaster is dreadful. It has a terrible hourly capacity at around 600 guests per hour, which means it gets some insane queues for a ride that literally goes for a minute. By the time this attraction gains any momentum, it's over. It never gets high enough to see anything interesting and has no show elements to set it apart from any other generic flat ride. F tier.
Surprisingly, Hong Kong Disneyland shares the equal second highest number of coasters, and its list has some of the highest highs and the lowest lows of any Disney park lineup. Now, this might be an edgy comment, but Hyperspace Mountain here is the worst version of Space Mountain anywhere in the world. The Star Wars overlay looks incredibly temporary, even though it's been in place for 10 years now. The projections used within light up the inner dome in a way that the mystery of Space Mountain, where you never really know where you're going, the overlay simply makes the ride worse. And unlike at Disneyland, at this park, it's permanent, rather than a limited time offering. The queue is also just a giant ugly cattle pen, followed by 2 barely themed rooms. Also slightly unrelated, but can they maybe pressure wash the outside of the mountain? It's looking kind of grotty. E tier. Now, we've already told you RC Racer is bad, and this version is no different. F tier. From worst to best, Big Grizzly Mountain Runaway Mine Cars is a standout, not just in this park, but the entire Disney Parks lineup. This is the modern version of Big Thunder that the park needed. The ride is packed with elements and surprises that just make it pure fun. The ride's layout interacts with the entire Grizzly Gulch land, where it weaves around and below you, making it just as enjoyable to watch off-ride as on. Though a ride is necessary to see the animatronics hidden within the mountain. Plus, it barely ever gets a big wait, so why not ride it a few times while you're there? A tier. Wandering Oaken's Sliding Sleighs is this park's kiddie coaster, so you probably already know where it's going to rank. This ride has a gorgeous queue, includes an animatronic Olaf and Sven, and is built in and around a beautiful mountainside that perfectly complements Frozen Land. However, the actual coaster itself is around 45 seconds long, including the lift hill, and is basically nothing. Imagine Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, but you took out the dark ride section. E tier.
Shanghai Disneyland is the newest Disney park, but it features no coasters exclusive to it. Thankfully, one of the rides they do offer is easily one of the best versions of it in the world, even though there are only 2 of them. Seven Dwarfs Mine Train is an exact copy and paste of the version at the Magic Kingdom, just without the large-scale impressive house with the dwarves dancing inside at the end. This does technically make it slightly worse because you've taken something away, but overall it's the same ride with the same capacity problems. D tier. Another Magic Kingdom copy is Tron Light Cycle Power Run. However, here, this is the original and superior version of the attraction. While the layout is exactly the same, the entire package works so much better here as Tomorrowland has been cleverly designed around Tron as the centerpiece. If you only get one chance to strap yourself into a light cycle and blast into the Tron world, make sure you do it here at night, as the lighting package only makes this amazing ride even more incredible. A tier. Don't let the slightly different name fool you. Rex's Racer is just RC Racer again, but with a statue of Rex out the front. F tier.
And that wraps things up for the list, apparently saving the worst for last. Currently around the world, Disney is building 3 brand new coasters. Space Mountain 2 in Tokyo, a Spider-Man launch coaster in Shanghai Disneyland, and the Monsters, Inc. door coaster for Disney's Hollywood Studios. So once these open, who knows what will happen to the rankings. But over to you. What's the best and worst Disney coaster you've ever ridden? And do you agree with our rankings, or are you about to absolutely rake us over the coals for our placements? Again, let us know in the comments down below. For Review Time, I'm Luke. From Dom and myself, thanks for watching.